this shit? What's up, fight fans? I'm the Force Awakens spoilers of mixed martial arts, Tommy Toehold. And after a crazy-ass fucking week of crazy-ass fucking fuckingness, we have yet another crazy-ass card, but this one is free and it has Cowboy Cerrone on it, so it's pretty much mandatory that you watch this card if you love America. You know you're gonna want to add to that awesomeness by playing in a countermove fantasy MMA game at countermove.com, so I'm gonna do what any best friend cartoon would do, and I'm gonna teach you how the fuck to play fantasy MMA, and then I'm gonna let you know who the fuck you should pick. First and foremost, let's teach you how to do this shit. Click on the How It Works tab. Let's watch a little video I made. First step is to select a game. There are free games, small games, and big games for all major MMA events. Next, you're gonna pick a team of 5 fighters. Each game is played over the course of a single fight card, and you have $25,000 for $10 to draft a team of 5 fighters. Once you pick your team, you're ready for the last step. Score points and win. Once the fights begin, you get points based on how your fighters perform. Points are awarded for strikes landed, submissions attempted, knockdowns, dominant positions, rounds won, and knockout or submission bonuses. The team with the most points at the end of the night wins the tournament. All caught up, fucking fantastic. Back at the main screen, you can see there are a lot of different games to pick. I would recommend hopping into a qualifier tournament for our New Year's Eve finale, where the winner gets a $10,000 top prize.
$10,000 top prize.
I'd also recommend my game, which is where we're headed now. $20 gets you in, the top spot gets a cold G. That's my kind of fucking game. That'll bring it to the team selection screen, which means it's time to make the fuck out of some picks. Let's look at this card starting at the bottom. First up, we've got Luis Henrique taking on Francis Canoa. Both fighters making their UFC debuts here. Both have high finish rates, but when you're coming in from outside the UFC, that can be a real crapshoot. Henrique, a huge favorite here. He comes from a good camp. He's only 22, and apparently he's a fucking monster of a man. I'm gonna go with a young gun in Henrique. Next up, we've got Haider Hassan taking on Vicente Luque. Both fighters coming off of losses in their UFC debuts. Hassan, a heavy favorite here. He's got KO power. He has first round finishes. He's a bit pricey, but when he wins, he usually knocks somebody out. I'm gonna go with Hassan. Next up, we've got Leon Edwards taking on Kamaru Usman. Edwards is on a 2-fight win streak since he lost his UFC debut via split decision, but he's coming over from across the pond to Usman's backyard. I think the Black Zillions fighter wins here, and if history serves him, it'll be via TKO, hopefully early. He's a decent value pick with a lot of finishes at 4,600. I'm going with Usman. Next up, we've got Cole Miller and Jim Allers. A lot of people sleep on Cole Miller, but you really shouldn't. He has fought everybody, and while he has a lot of losses in the UFC, he also has some very good wins against really tough guys. Miller almost has more submissions in the UFC alone than Allers has in his entire career. Miller via sub, he's a solid pick, but a bit pricey. Next up, we've got Nick Lentz taking on Danny Castillo. Interesting, Lentz's favorite here, likely because Castillo's recent bad luck, but Danny has lost a split decision to Jim Miller and Tony Ferguson, a majority decision to Edson Barbosa, and was KO'd by Paul Felder, but he has wins over Tim Means, Dustin Poirier, and Ricardo Lamas. To me, this match is Danny's to win. His camp has already fought Lentz successfully, so Castillo is going to be familiar with him. I think Danny wins via decision. Next up, we've got Josh Salmon taking on Tamden McCrory. Josh Salmon has been on a tear in the UFC, back-to-back performance of the night bonuses. McCrory debuted in the UFC in 2007, then stopped fighting from 2009 to 2014. He has one fight in early 2015 in Bellator. Not enough consistency for me here. I believe in Josh Salmon. I think he stops this fight possibly early. Going with Salmon at 4,900. Next up, we've got Sarah Kaufman taking on Valentina Shevchenko. Sarah Kaufman has fought everybody and always fights tough as hell. Shevchenko is making her UFC debut. I don't think she has fought at the same level as Kaufman, and when she did, she got her one loss against an opponent in Liz Carmouche that Kaufman has beat. Not to mention, Shevchenko has taken this fight on a very short notice. Kaufman wins here, but she hasn't had a finish in nearly 5 years, so avoid her on your counter move team. Next up, we've got Nate Marquardt and CB Dollaway. Two crafty vets here. Marquardt has 50 pro fights under his belt. Holy shit, that's a lot of kicking and punching. It's hard for me to pick Nate right now with how his recent career has been, but he has 16 submission wins, and he's a fucking ace on the ground. Far more so than Dollaway, and I think that will end up being the difference here. Marquardt via most likely sub, but with his wear and tear, I'd be hesitant to slot him on my team. Next up, we've got Charles Oliveira taking on Miles Jury. Du Bronx is the favorite here, and to me, I can't find fault with that. When you look at Oliveira's resume, even though it's scattered with losses, those are against the best the UFC has to offer. Jury's only loss comes to Cowboy, of course, but overall, these fighters have fought different levels of competition. I think this fight goes to the ground where both guys are comfortable and black belts, but hard to argue with 7 submission wins in the UFC. I think Du Bronx wins via sub or possibly a sound decision. And we're on to the main card. Karolina Kowalkiewicz is taking on Ronda Marcos. This is a very hard fight to pick. If you've watched Tough or have seen her in the UFC, you know Marcos is tough, and against tough opponents, she lost a split decision to Jessica Penne and won a decision against Ash Daly. I have seen Kowalkiewicz fight before in Invicta, SOCIA, and it was one of the best strawweight fights I've ever seen. I'm gonna say this one turns out to be just as awesome. Probably goes to a split decision for Marcos, but honestly too close to call with the data. I would avoid this one on my counter move game. Next up, we've got the return of Nate Diaz taking on Michael Johnson. Nate is back, and what he does best is sub people. Johnson's main way of winning in the UFC is decision, but the way he has lost most in his career is via sub. In terms of a counter move pick, Nate makes the most sense. He's coming back after a long layoff. He should be fresh. I think he gets a finish on the ground. I'm gonna go with Diaz, and at 4,900, the price ain't too bad. On to the co-main event, we got Junior Dos Santos taking on Alistair Overeem. The heavyweight division is fucking insane. There are more Ric Flair-like comebacks than anywhere else in this sport, so never count anybody out. The Reem has been fighting smarter and leaner, and he's in a great camp. JDS does what JDS does, and he's only ever lost in the UFC to a guy named Cain Velasquez, so to me, this is JDS's fight to lose. Reem has been KO TKO'd in his last 3 losses, but smarter, leaner Overeem might end up being a challenge here. I think it's either a JDS KO or a Reem decision, so for the sake of counter move, I gotta go with JDS, but I'm hesitant to put him on my team because you never know what Reem you're gonna get. And if you're looking to make a value pick, you won't find anybody at Overeem's price with that many finishes. And finally, we've got the main event, the lightweight championship, Rafael Dos Anjos taking on Donald Cerrone. Huge favorite is Dos Anjos here, and if you saw their first fight, I'm not entirely sure why. Dos Anjos had a great first round, a decent second round, and by the third round, Cerrone was finally getting into his groove. It was just too late. I think this is a close fight, but because it goes 5 rounds, I think that favors the slow-starting Cerrone. I think it'll be a completely different fight than the first time, and I think by the championship rounds, Cerrone will have Dos Anjos on his heels. I think we get a new champion, Cerrone via decision or sub, but I expect a high score because Cerrone is always busy. He's a solid pick on your team, fight fans. Now that we've gone through the whole card, it's time to make your picks. You can go with whoever the fuck you want to go with, but my squad is Donald Cerrone, Josh Salmon, Cole Miller, Hyder Hassan, and I'm gonna dream with the Reem. Overeem for the upset, it allows my other picks, and the guy has 35 finishes in his fight career. Once you've got your team, hit the play now button, invite some friends. From now to fight night, change your team as much as you fucking want. There has never been a better time to play. Get in my game and get in a qualifier game for that big New Year's Eve tournament. At UFC 195, Lawler vs. Condit, Countermove is holding a $25,000 finale game with a top prize of $10,000 That is life-changing money. There will be a series of qualifier events each week, kicking off with UFC 192, going through UFC 195. The qualifier games happen each week across each week's events and have normal entry fees. The top places in the qualifier games earn a ticket to the finale, but you can also buy a ticket to the finale right fucking now for $500 because you gotta risk it to get the biscuit. Unless you win a qualifier, then you're in the finale. You're gonna have a blast this Saturday, and Countermove makes it that much more fun. For everybody at Countermove Fantasy MMA at countermove.com, I'm Tommy Toehold. See you on the leaderboards, motherfuckers!